5 questions of the vice president, who is also the head of the economic management team, that will go through with you shortly and interrogate as well. Listen to former Deputy Finance Minister Kesa Latofosi, who is also the minority spokesperson on finance.
The current worsening economic condition are self-inflicted. They stem from gross mismanagement and poor policy choices by His Excellency President Akufo-Addo's government, which economic management team is led by our Vice President. The rapid decline to the value of the city has thrown the economy in disarray, and the projections surrounding it as contained in the 2019 budget. This has therefore undermined the confidence in the economy and sent the wrong signals to the investor community. This calls for urgent steps to be taken by government to restore the economic health. The starting point is that we should be immediately presenting a new budget which considers all the distortions and serious problems occasioned by the fall of the value of the city. At the minimum, we expect a statement to Parliament assuring the nation and the investor community on the steps taken by government to address the instability of the economy. The budget as presented by the Minister of Finance can no longer be relied upon as the true blueprint upon which the management of the economy for the year can hinge. Its credibility and sustainability have been completely undermined by the cedi depreciation. President Akufo-Addo and his economic team, led by the Vice President, must concede that they have failed and have been unable to live up to the lofty rhetorics rolled out during the 2016 campaign.
Let's go into some of the details as put out by the minority, and we'll also talk about the 5 questions the minority is asking of the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who is also the chair of the economic management team. My colleague Joseph Gakpo is in the studio with me. Joseph, you were at this press conference. They lay out a basis they believe will form the precursor to an economic crisis. What is this?
So that's exactly the point they're making, that the economy is headed towards a crisis point, and they explain that they think it's so because the public debt, they say, has reached unprecedented levels. They claim the public debt has reached 201.8 billion Ghana cedis, and government has not shown anything for that. And they claim that out of the 201.8 billion Ghana cedis over the last 2 years, the borrowing that has been done alone amounts to 80 billion Ghana cedis. So that's almost half of all the total debt stock the country has been borrowed over the last 2 years, the minority claims. They also claim that as a result of the depreciation of the cedi, the country's external debt has shot up by another 15.3 billion Ghana cedis. When you convert it to dollar terms and compare the figure today when it comes to how it looked like 3 months ago. And then they say that then they made the point in relation to the budget, that the budget has been rendered useless, they say, because it was done at a time when the pegging of the cedi to the dollar was 4.8 Ghana cedis, but it now reached 5.65. They asking how can the economy be run on external debt alone. They claim that the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, is faking the macroeconomic indices. A very serious allegation they're making there, that Dr. Bawumia is faking the macroeconomic indices, and they're asking what kind of wizardry is that. That's the term they use. They again claim that investors have lost confidence in the Ghanaian economy, and this is sending wrong signals to the investor economy, and they are pulling their money out of the country, which they think is a big issue. They say the economy is worsening and that workers are losing their job. They claim government is using all the hard-earned revenue to pay loans as a result of the depreciation of the cedi, and then they think that with the weakening investor confidence, there is uncertainty, and chances are that a lot more workers will lose their job. And then they go on to claim that government is, lying when it comes to the various economic indicators that they've given, and that businesses are experiencing a harsh financial situations, and they are predicting that more Ghanaian businesses would collapse in the coming days as a result of the challenges with the Ghana city.
I see. We'll go to some of the specifics about which economic figures the Vice President is faking, but they ask some 5 questions of the Vice President. What are these?
And this is specifically in relation to the work of the central bank, and they made a claim that the central bank is being run in a political manner, to the extent that independent folks, they are not being allowed to take decisions that would be in the best interest of the country, which they say is contributing to the cedi losing its value. So they're asking 5 questions. They're asking, why would an independent central bank with focus on price stability decide to reduce the monetary policy rates against its own research findings that U.S. policy normalization is strengthening the U.S. dollar and causing investors to move funds away from emerging economies, and that upward adjustments in domestic prices of petroleum products are likely to affect transport and utility prices? So the claim is that from the BOG's own research, with even how the U.S. Currency is behaving, we shouldn't have seen a situation of the manipulation of the monetary policy rate, but that has happened. They asked the second question, why would an independent central bank with a focus on price stability decide to lower the policy rate in the face of dwindling net international reserves and a rising interest rate abroad? The third question they're asking is, why would an independent central bank with focus on price stability decide to reduce the monetary policy rates in favor of growth, which has been projected to be higher than the previous years, while the local currency is under pressure? And then the fourth question, why would the central bank decide to lower policy rate in the face of excess liquidity in the banking sector, emanating from the banks increasing their minimum paid-up capital by over 100%, while the local currency is fast depreciating? And the fifth question they're asking the Vice President is, and I'm quoting that verbatim, they say, clearly, an economy cannot be externally unstable and internally stable. How can a rapid exchange rate depreciation be accompanied with a single-digit inflation rate as captured by the post macroeconomic indicators? So one of the economic indicators they claim is being faked by the government is the rate of inflation.
I see. Now, this demand they make of government must present a new budget, because the old budget they presented for 2019 has lost its credibility. You're in Parliament. Is that even possible?
So usually, in the middle of every year, beyond the main budget statement that is read, there's the presentation of the midterm budget review, when the finance minister comes in to review the figures based on all that had happened more than 7 months after he presented the budget. So we're all expecting that when the House goes on break early next month and returns sometime in July. But now the minority wants the review done even now, because of what they're seeing is the situation of the depreciation of the local currency. It's possible if the finance minister decides to, but what everyone is looking forward to currently is in July, when he presents the midterm budget review.
Thank you very much, Joseph. On the line with me now is Fifi Kwete, who joins us on the telephone line right now. Himself used to be at the Finance Ministry. Mr. Kwete, thank you very much for your time here on Top Story.
Hi, good evening to you, Evans, and good evening to all your many listeners.
Before I come to you, the government has held its own press conference today to respond to the minorities' press conference. Kojo Ponkruma has been speaking to some of the things that you had put out today. Directed the issue about the city. This is what he said about the city's, what he believes to be a recovery since what we've witnessed last week. Just listen briefly to him.
The substance of their presentation today essentially is that the city has depreciated and that importers have taken a hit. Now, this is an already acknowledged point, and government has already been working to address the situation. The Bank of Ghana outlined its short-term measures, the finance minister outlined the medium-term measures, and today you are beginning to see a gradual recovery of the Ghanaian cedi. We expect that these recent efforts, in addition to efforts like the successful issuance, as well as some of the other medium-term items that have been outlined, will lead to an eventual reversal of the recent shocks that the currency has suffered. So the city is gradually making a comeback, and this minority attempts to take political jabs is a bit late in the day. Now, I've also been explaining to you the medium and long-term solutions, which for us give us the conviction that we will be able to hold our own when it comes to the Ghanaian currency. So I'd like to encourage the Ghanaian populace and people who trade in our currency and other things the world over that don't pay attention to these speculations. Look at the hard numbers on the ground and work in accordance with those hard numbers. Indeed, last year they made similar speculations that would go beyond 5 before the year was over. That wasn't occasioned. We were able to contain it. In the first quarter of this year, as a result of about 3 major things, we believe that some activities in the West African sub-region caused a lot of some of our West African brothers to literally drop their monies in banks that are affiliated to their countries and to withdraw them in hard currency here, adding to the increased demand here. We are clear that in Q1 of every year, when the multinational companies are taking their profits out after they have completed their books, you see some pressure on the currency. And then also, as a matter of fact, there was an exercise to build up our foreign reserves to a particular, may I say, quantum, which initially made it difficult for any sort of support or intervention to the currency. Many of these things have been dealt with. So we don't share that, that speculation. We think it's unhealthy, and we ask the minority to stop that in the name of Ghana, stop that in the interest of Ghana.
Mr. Kwete, so let's start with the final point he makes there, that the speculations of the cedi hitting 6 cedis to the dollar by third quarter ending, it's not in the interest of the country, because that's what eventually then pushes, will push the cedi to that point, because people listen to the speculation and people act on it in the investor community. What's your reaction to
that? Yeah, thank you very much, Evans. And let me begin by saying that we, in presenting our statements, made it clear that a number of reputable financial organizations have done their own computations. And what we did was literally to make a reference to some of the computations that have been done. And these are institutions that actually have global relevance, and they have no particular political interest in Ghana. And of course, they clearly are not what you call doomsayers, and their computations are some of the computations we refer to. And many of them compute that the way, checking the numbers, which of course they are crunching on a day-to-day basis, they anticipate that the rate at which things are going, we could be looking at the possibility of hitting over 6 by the third quarter of this year. So this has nothing to do with us. We are not generating those numbers ourselves. We are just making reference to numbers that already are there in the public domain. And the international investor community and people who are even within the domestic economy are pretty much following what is going on.
Government.
So I don't think they should try to create an impression of if we are those who are creating the numbers.
Government's point is the current evidence as of today doesn't support that projection, because yes, last week, a few short days ago, the cedi was at 5.9, 5.8 thereabout. Today, it's recovered quite strongly, trading just around 5.2, 5.3 to the dollar. Government point to that and say that is evidence of hard work, which has led to recovery. And so if 5.9 to 5.2 in a week, that should tell you that those predictions that minority obviously believing and have trumpeted today can be accurate.
Even at our press forum today, we actually quoted today's figures at a Greek Development Bank. And we mentioned it to everybody that our checks with Agri Development, and that's verifiable by you in the media. You can do your check with various banks, and you will know that today, trading, the dollar trading at the Agri Development Bank was trading at 5.65. You talk to Barclays Bank, I think they were doing 5.55. And others are doing 5 point close, so it's within the same range, 5.5, 5.6, and that is within the banking sector.
But that's a recovery, isn't it? Because it used to be 5.9 just last week.
5.9 why?
just last week.
You know, you must not mix up what happens in the Forest Bureau and then what's happening within the banks. Okay? What's happening within the banks and the Forest Bureau are totally different. It's always been the same historically. It's to go out to the Forest Bureau today, and you actually realize that they are way above the 5.65 I talk about today. Now, let's get a bit into the essence, though. You recall, I think in the latter part of last year, I think the third quarter last year, at that time when the city came under pressure and was threatening to go above 5, that was the time where they got what I call the temporary relief in terms of the cocoa proceeds, and then they pump into the system, and that created what I call some cosmetic stability. Now, as soon as that injection clearly got its way through, I mean, what did we see? The city quickly galloped beyond the 5, which was supposed to be the magical number as of last year. It galloped beyond it. And now, I mean, as of this year, I mean, from your own computation, we go to the Forest Bureau, it's now closer to 6 than it is to 5. Now, so, I mean, having this cosmetic injection, okay, that clearly upon Nkrumah is making reference to, and using that to create the impression as if some, should I call it, magical solution has been found, is simply, again, doing, unfortunately, what our friends in government love to do. I mean, trying very hard to pull a fast one, I mean, on the people of Ghana and create impression about some abilities that obviously they do not possess. And I think you in the media should be far more perspicacious than that and be able to really hold them to the fact that, listen, I mean, within their own, if you listen to them themselves, even when they were in opposition, they did explain. That, listen, I mean, pumping in what you call all these huge foreign exchange into the system may provide some temporary relief, but that does not in any way address the fundamental issues.
And there's a demand you're making in the press conference today, which is the presentation of a new budget. And from what I understand, that is something that happens anyway without you making a call for it, because the budget review will come sometime mid-year.
Yeah, but then you should appreciate as well that when you have a situation where, let's call it the computation show that there's a marked and clear significant changes as far as the numbers are concerned, it can put everything out of gear. If, for example, within less than 3 months into the coming of 2019, you have, for example, the external debt jumping in the region of about 15+ billion. That's quite massive. That's without even taking into account any new borrowing. That's quite massive. That changes quite a lot of things, because a lot of things depend on the computation of the CD to the dollar. A lot of the numbers in the budget were projected on the basis of some particular numbers. So if things go according to a certain level and then things quickly, rapidly, deteriorate, there is a need for finance ministry as a matter of urgency to be looking at the numbers and be thinking about, listen, maybe there's a need for us to come before Parliament and see how we can, in the light of the new realities, present new numbers in order to be able to cope.
But wouldn't that be addressed by the established, budget review, which comes anyway? That can address that.
Yeah, but nothing prevents the Minister of Finance from coming to Parliament in order to tell us that, listen, in the light of these difficulties, we want to be able to. I mean, you can say you want to wait until the budget review, yeah, but then that may be to your detriment. Because if things continue to rapidly deteriorate, you don't want to wait until the normal time you normally come for budget review in order to be able to tell Parliament what is happening. That's why in many countries, when there are it's like a crunch time and there's a need for you to quickly go before Parliament and make certain presentation, you do. The choice is theirs anyway. They can choose whether they want to come now or they want to wait until maybe things get much worse. But you know what? Even I think the essential thing that we need to recall is that when you show clearly that you don't want to show credibility in your management of affairs of a country, you get exposed. When you obviously do show that you don't want to be very truthful in the way you assess what it is you have made, you get exposed. Now we're talking about a group that consistently told this country that anytime there is massive problem relating to the currency of a country. It has to do with the leadership. It has to do with economic management. And that same group today is here and trying very hard to create the impression that, no, this time around, the depreciation of the currency has nothing to do with bad leadership, has nothing to do with the economic mismanagement. You, as journalists, and the country as a whole must be able to call them to order and say, listen, this double standard must stop. If it was economic mismanagement yesterday, then why is it not an economic mismanagement today?
Well, I want to say a big thank you to you, Mr. Kwete, for your time here on Top Story. I must indicate that we had invited government to speak to the issues after the press conference, but they're not available. However, indication is that the vice president will be holding a town hall to deal with some of the economic questions that have been asked in the last few weeks as far as the city is concerned and the general economic performance under this current administration. However, let's bring in economist Professor Bokwing, who joins us on the line. Prof, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Yes, good evening, and good evening to our cherished listeners.
The city is recovering somewhat following the terrible fall last week. The question really goes to the heart of whether this is sustainable.
I think that when it comes to the question of sustainability, we are all concerned because beyond 4 months, beyond 5 months, towards the end of the year, when the next first quarter begins, what happens, especially 2020, these are issues that perhaps would engage everybody because we are seeing some kind of recovery. People, for how long can this be sustained? I think that is a legitimate question. But I want to believe that there is some hope. I'm saying there's some hope because when you look at the fundamentals of the economy, necessarily they have not weakened. And therefore, if the depreciation is not anchored necessarily by weak economic fundamentals, then you want to look at the demand-supply temporary imbalances. And the way to do so is, where do I get dollars to meet the demand? And so that is what the government is trying to do in terms of the inflows that we are expecting from the cocoa syndicated loan, from cocoa loan, from Eurobond. We are also talking about exiting the IMF and then maybe getting the last tranche of the IMF proceeds and all of that. So it is not unique, and it is not unique to the extent that this is how we have managed our life over the years. We borrow to shore up our international reserves.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. This is how we've done it. But isn't it time to change?
Well,
because you've seen that invariably we'll return to this point again a few months down the line, and we're kicking the same old way of doing things.
Precisely. To change, I don't think that it's a 2-year decision, it's a 3-year decision. Structural changes take time, and we have to be gradual because reforms, they take time to bear fruit.
And forgive me, have you seen any evidence in the last 2 years to indicate to you, to give you confidence that these fundamental structural issues have been addressed?
I think that some steps are being taken. I don't think they are sufficient. We could have done better. But don't forget, many of these things require money. You don't have the money. And that is why Ghanaians are more efficient when they are in opposition. Because there you can hold so many things constant and talk about what you should do. But when you are in governance, the dynamics change because there are a lot of competing interests. And we don't have that physical space to be able to finance the much needed structural reforms that we have to be able to do. We don't. There is very little local content in this economy. Look, when you look at the fundamentals, hold constant ownership, you will see that since 2017, our trade balance has been positive. In fact, trade balance was positive in 2018 to the tune of about $1.5 billion. But you see where the problem is? Then you want to look at the services and the income account, where we are exposed to the tune of over $6 billion, ultimately translating to a current account deficit. This is what we are experiencing. Okay, so we have, look, our economy is driven largely by just 55 institutional units. Less than 5% of them are Ghanaian owned. You cannot call this economy yours. Okay.
In other words, they make the money, they change the dollars, and then they just take the money out.
Precisely. We just found enough for others to go and eat. It's as simple as that. Return on capital far exceeds return on labor in this country. It tells you that we are just making money for those who have invested in financing the growth. And the financing is coming more from the external environment. And that is why, it is common knowledge today, because every quarter, the first quarter of every year, the city is exposed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of exit in terms of a demand for dollars in transferring profit, dividend, all of that. And then you also want to look at your debt management strategy, which we started somewhere 2015. So we have a little bit of domestic borrowing, but we have opened it up to foreign investors. So these foreign investors, these are not Ghanaians. So when they are exiting, they will not go away with cedis. Cedi can only go as far as the Togo border. So they will be demanding dollars. And once they are demanding dollars and you don't have sufficient dollars, then it means that the city will have to take a deep haircut. That is what we have experienced in the last couple of weeks. But you see, because of the IMF program also, we were constrained in defending the stability of the city, because we didn't want to dip our hands into our international reserves in order to show up the stability of the city, because we needed our international reserves to be at a certain level in order to exit successfully from the IMF program. So what the government is doing now is not strange. I mean, countries do that in terms of the floating exchange rate system. The central bank enters market to buy dollar or sell dollar on its own account in order to manage the volatility. That is largely to be expected. Okay. But the question is it sustainable?
And your answer to that directly is it?
I have my doubt. I
doubt if it's sustainable.
It's sustainable. But if we did everything right, the city will still deplete by a certain margin because of the differentials between the size of our economy and then the size of the economies that the city interprets.
Yeah.
Let us not pretend about the reality. You know, since July 1965, when the city was introduced, to date, the city has lost 99.99% of its value.
You're almost saying that it's inevitable that it will go down further. Okay, I'm grateful just for the sake of time, but this is a fascinating conversation. Professor Bokwe, thank you very much for joining us with those thoughts. Business is going to come up at 5:30, 6:30 with more on this conversation. But News Night starts right now.